What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you my second place regional deck profile of Dinomorphia, so, featuring Rex right here. And I'm going to put my rounds on the screen, just so you guys can see what I played against and whatnot, but I'm actually going to be discussing my rounds and matchups at the end of the deck profile, because I think for Dinomorphia in particular, matchups are very, very important when you're considering playing this deck, because different matchups play very differently with this deck, especially when you talk about things like Despia and even Sword Soul to an extent. So yeah, you play differently in different matchups, and it's one of the things I like about this deck is it feels like there's not many decks where your matchups matter so much that you change the way you play drastically. So I think listening to the matchups is actually really cool and pretty insightful, so if you want to stay for that, it will be at the end of the profile. But yeah, I'm just going to go through my list and tell you how I topped the Tulsa Regional. With Dinomorphia, it was 298 players. 258 players, not 298, 258. And it was 9 rounds of Swiss, so we had a long day. But yeah, I just got back from the event, and let's get into this deck profile. Alright, so getting into the profile, we are going to start with the main deck, and we are going to start with, of course, the 3 Theresia, because she is sort of your main starter. In fact, I would say she's the only monster starter in the deck, funny enough. And you of course are going to maximize her at 3, and she just sets a Dinomorphia trap from your deck on summon. And then we of course have the 3 Diplos, and Diplos is really interesting because he isn't a starter, but you still have to maximize him at 3 in my opinion. I'll also show that I am running 1 Fossil Dig along with these. And yes, just 1 Fossil Dig, which I will talk about in a second, because I feel like 1 Fossil Dig is an odd choice. But going into the event, I was actually considering running 2 Diplos and 2 Fossil Dig, because you have the same chance to draw a monster in your opening hand, with a higher consistency of it being Theresia if you do 2 and 2. But there are so many times that you need 3 Diplos in your deck to resolve multiple fusion traps, that I'm really glad I went with this ratio and didn't even try the 2 Diplos. I had very little testing with it, and I thought about trying it for this event. But 3 Diplos was definitely the way with 1 Fossil Dig. And the reason we're on 1 Fossil Dig is because I just did not want to open too many monsters. And even with this very, very low monster count, there were still a couple of hands where drawing too many monsters was my demise in some games. So yeah, this ratio worked really nice. There are reasons to play multiple Fossil Digs, just not in this version. This deck is not on Miscellaneousaurus or the Aolo to do Halqifibrax stuff, but if I did want to adapt to that build, and I do think Misk was something I'm considering adding after this event, because I do think it came up a couple of times where it could be very nice, especially if your opponent pitches a trap for Droplet, you can protect your Rex with Misk, which is really nice. So I may try a build with Miscellaneousaurus, but I don't think it's needed, and it sort of plays into the fact of drawing too many monsters. You only really want to open Theresia, but unfortunately Diplos is an engine requirement you have to max out. So I do like this ratio. You may ask why play the Fossil Dig at all? And the reason we still chose to play the Fossil Dig is just because it is another monster, right? And I'm playing a lot of other consistency spells that have a chance to see Fossil Dig as well, which I will explain in a bit. Next up, we do have the 3 Ash Blossom, and this card just absolutely overperformed at this event. This card was insane. The last build I uploaded to the channel, which was actually just a week ago, and I actually said in the profile I wasn't going to take this deck to regional, and I was on Evil Twin for a while thinking I might take that again, but I really wanted to play Dinomorphia, and in my limited testing, I knew that I wanted to play this deck with hand traps. My last build had 0 hand traps, and I think that was actually one of the weaker things about it. Ash absolutely overperformed at the event, but she was just the best card in my deck almost. There were a few matches where I actually opened double Ash Blossom, and it was super, super clutch. Ash was way overperforming. I'm so glad I decided to play these. And I also decided to play 3 Infinite Impermanence, and that means we were on 6 total hand traps. And yeah, this card was good. It wasn't as good as Ash, but it definitely was good. Final round against a Despia player, this card sort of won me my game in game 3, negating an Aluber. And when I was playing this deck, the more trap variant with Lord of the Heavenly Prison and more floodgates, There were just so many things you needed to stop that were high impact, like an Aluber Search, like a Robina, like a Mo Yi, and I really knew going into the event I wanted to play hand traps. So I played what I thought were the 6 best hand traps, especially in a deck that can't capitalize on Droll and Lockbird the same way, or even Nibiru to an extent. So I wanted to play these, and I'm so glad I chose to play Ashe because she overperformed. She was 100%, just like some games she was just an FTK, and that is so good. And Ashe is like part of the reason for my top, to be honest. Like, she just overperformed. All right, on to spells. I played 3 Pot of Prosperity. This card is so good. Now, I guess when I'm on this card, I actually really want to talk about one of the reasons I decided to play Dinomorphia. And that is initially, well, one, I've been playing the deck for a while, so I wanted to, play it for a long time. And especially at an event, but I saw a list do well at Fort Worth, which was the regional I top 4'd with Sword Soul, and that list was running like so many floodgates, and I did not like that version at all. Like, no discredit to the guy who did really well at that event, his build worked for him, but he decided to play 3 Fossil Dig and no pot cards, and cards like this are absolutely amazing in this deck, because if you already draw a monster like Theresia, you don't want any more monsters, right? You want to see good trap cards like Solemn Judgment, Dinomorphia Sonic, or an additional fusion trap, which is huge. I'll be talking a lot about the Dinomorphia trap cards in every role they play. But Prosperity is absolutely pivotal to like maximizing the consistency of this deck, along with, I guess I'll go ahead and show them, the 2 Pot of Duality. So being able to dig 9 cards, first of all, is insane when you consider them together, and that happened a lot. But again, these cards, unlike a card like Fossil Dig, if you chose to maximize that, these cards can help you find either, right? They can help you find a starter in the form of Theresia, or instantly get your fusion trap. Like, it's not just a monster, which Fossil Dig is very limiting in that factor. It's only gonna get you Theresia, right? Unless you play Miscellaneous Source, which this list, I decided not to play that card. But these, again, they can be the best trap card off the top of your deck. You can dig 9 for Theresia, or you can find Frenzy, you can find Domain, you find Solemn Judgment, and then post game 1, you can find side deck cards. So these are phenomenal. Like, these maximize the consistency and power of the deck. These also overperform, but you never like feel these do the work because it's actually the cards you grab that's doing it. But these let you see those more often. So these were super, super clutch. Being able to play both Prosperity and Duality always feels great because it does give you the dig 9 option, which is so, so good. And then lastly, for spells, I am running the 1 Called by the Grave, and that's because this card is, broken, especially in a deck like Dinomorphia, where Ash Blossom is just an absolute terror. Called by the Grave is mandatory in this deck because it can stop Ash Blossom. But this card is just great. It's a good go second card against a deck like Despia, and honestly, it's one of the best interrupts you can set. And funny enough, it is a spell card, so if you get red rebooted, this is still an interrupt and might help you survive a red reboot, right? Which I did get red rebooted once at this event, and I survived, but I'll explain more of that in my matchups when I talk about those. All right, on to the Dinomorphia trap cards. I mean, trap cards in general, but we're gonna talk about the Dinomorphia trap cards first. So we're gonna start with our 3 Dinomorphia Frenzy, the best trap card in the deck. But it is also shared by the 3 Dinomorphia Domain, the other best trap card in the deck. Both of these are phenomenal. Like, a lot of people, when they do like a Dinomorphia deck profile or they talk about the deck, they'll just make it sound like Frenzy is so much better than Domain, which just isn't true. Frenzy's the better card, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Domain's better than Frenzy, that's not the case. But they're so like equal and good at different times, like it's really hard to, quantify one better than the other. Like, you need these to be what they are. Like, if your Theresia comes back on your opponent's turn because they destroyed a fusion or proc like a Diplos effect, right? You're never setting Frenzy. You're setting Domain to fusion on your turn, and that's something this can do that Frenzy can't. Frenzy also needs to send from deck and extra deck. It cannot send from field. And sometimes when your life points are low, you have to do sneaky things to not take damage. And fusing from field is absolutely huge because it just means you can summon something in defense position. But most importantly, talking about the Dinomorphia fusion traps, you know what, before I go into that, I actually want to show all the fusion traps. So I don't know if I'm going to have enough room on the screen to show these, super nicely, but I want to talk about them all together. We have the 2 Dinomorphia Sonic, which is just, a fantastic card for several reasons. The 1, I kind of did this wrong, hold up. The Sonics right here, we'll set them like that. the 1 Brute, and the 1 Alert. So I'm hoping this can see everything on the screen. I actually can't see my camera as I'm doing this, but yeah, I want to talk about all these. So the traps in Dinomorphia are so good because they really gave the deck sort of an out to almost any situation, and going into this event, how you set your Dinomorphia traps like really mattered based on the matchup. So like if you wanted to play around Ash Blossom, right, which is really important, this deck loses to Ash, you wanted to go for double fusion, and that was what I went for most of the time. If you get both fusion traps, Ash does not affect you at all, because say you activate Frenzy, right, and it gets Ash, okay, activate Domain, make Kentragina, banish the Frenzy, and you still get Rexstrom and Kentragina. The other way around, you Domain, get Ashed, okay, you Frenzy, and you make Kentragina, and you banish Frenzy, and you still make Rexstrom. So if you have both, Ash does not affect you. So getting double fusion trap not only meant your board was going to be insane, but it played around Ash the best. So that's what you want to do around Ash. Game 2 and 3, if you're playing around things like Lightning Storm, evenly matched, very powerful spell and trap removal, more importantly, things like Forbidden Droplet, or Chalice or Imperm, Sonic is here to protect Rexstrom essentially. Like obviously you're a back row deck that loses to things like Lightning Storm and Evenly, and Sonic can protect you from those. But Rexstrom is like a castle. Like you're protecting that castle because he is so good and he will win you games on his own. So Sonic negating things like Forbidden Droplet if they don't pitch a trap, Imperm, it's really clutch for that. And then game 2 and 3 for evenly matched, it's super amazing if they're playing that. Brute gives you not only just like a good out, like a good interrupt, being, you know, sort of like a Regeki Break type pop effect that can be really helpful. It is an out to Mystic Mine. It's your main deck out to Mystic Mine. Of course, we are playing things like Solemn Judgment, so we could technically link off with our monsters into like a Dark, and then Solemn Judgment our own summon and play around Mystic Mine. But this gives you a much better out to Mystic Mine, we'll say. So it's an out for things like that, as well as just like really annoying face-up cards potentially. An Alert is really good because it's an out for Super Poly. Like if you're playing against Despia and you already have like both of these in access, or maybe even multiples, you get Alert. And you get Alert because if you get Super Poly'd, like say they Super Poly your board and made Drago Stapelia, you just alert back your Rexstrom, and it didn't matter that they made Drago Stapelia. Rexstrom is stopping whatever they're doing. Like it just doesn't matter. So as long as you have Alert, you play around Super Poly. And I just love how this Dinomorphia trap lineup is able to play around just about everything. And of course they have effects engraved that matter. Sonic was always the most important because it's the one that negates battle damage, so it's the one you're dumping with Diplos if it comes up because you really need to make sure you don't lose to cheeky battle damage. But yeah, the Dinomorphia, I think the ratios were also fantastic. Again, I was on 3 Sonic in one list. I think even the list I uploaded recently, but it is so terrible drawing going second, I just wanted to cut it to 2. So we just played these 10 Dinomorphia traps, and it worked out extremely well, and these being one of them is also fantastic. So yeah, that's it for the Dinomorphia trap lineup. It is 10 traps. All right, time to talk about the clutch card. We have 2 Ferret Flame. Now, Ferret Flames, this card in testing, so originally in my last build, I actually had 3 Torrential, 3 Ferret Flames. It turns out in testing, especially against the Despia matchup, which was one of the hardest matchups I was expecting to play, Torrential is trash. Okay, we're not playing Torrential. Not in the side deck, not in the main deck, even though it's really good versus Sword Soul and other decks like Fluwandereeze. And Ferret Flames actually went down to 2 because I wanted to play hand traps, essentially, right? I had to take something out for hand traps, I had to take something out for like the Fossil Dig, in the way I wanted to play this list. So the Torrentials had to be cut, and we actually had to cut a Ferret Flame. Now, Ferret Flame was the card I decided to keep in over something like Torrential because this card is insanely clutch. And this card, honestly, there are a couple of moments I can name that it's the reason I top, because I would have lost to Virtual World round 3 if I didn't have this card, because I put myself low on life points, like maybe 200, and he made Final Sigma. And Final Sigma is a threat. It is going to kill you, and it's unaffected. But Ferret Flames does not care because it makes your opponent shuffle monsters back. This for round 3 against the Virtual World player shuffling back Final Sigma, and this in round 8 playing against Salamangreat versus, you know, a person I know, you know, decently. They come to the shop sometimes, Baron. It came up really clutch against him as well. And yeah, like, Ferret Flames was super clutch, and I can thank some of my top to it, and this card was just like good. I didn't see it often, you know, it is just a 2 of, and it's not like I was grabbing this off of Prosperity often, but when I did see it, it was super good. So Ferret Flames, definitely, like in my last profile I said, one of the reasons to play the deck, and I still think it's a really cool option that only this deck can play, and it is super blowout. All right, next up we have the 3 Solemn Judgment, of course. I mean, it kind of synergizes with the deck because it says pay half, but also this card overperformed, which I'll get to in a second. But I also went back to 3 Solemn Strike, and I believe I said I wasn't, last profile I said I wasn't playing this card because it doesn't work with the deck right. And it does have some confliction. I'm not like going back on what I said, but again, Ash Blossom is such an issue that this is almost only just to protect your fusion traps from Ash, almost. But at the event, it just never, ever came up for that situation. This card was just being Solemn Strike, so it was being like a good go second trap, and also just, negating opponent's monster's effects like a Luber, or, the summon of a Synchro monster. This, negated the summon of a Heat Soul against Salamangreat. And it was just good. And also Stealth Bergia actually really assisted with this card because it means I was able to activate it even when I didn't have the life points. Because Stealth Bergia, once I get to talking about the extra deck, Stealth Bergia actually came up clutch several times, which is, contrary to what a lot of Dinomorphia players say. And Judgment overperformed. This card is crazy. It negated, Forbidden Droplets, it negated Lightning Storms, it negated anything that would just beat you, right? And you have Dig 9 with the 3 Prosperity, 2 Duality. You could see this very consistently. Along with your in-engine outs, it meant like Droplets was almost never resolving. And yeah, the 6 Solemns definitely put in work. And then lastly, I played 3 Gozen Match, which was awful. And I don't think it's because the choice to play this was wrong. This card happened to be awful because if you looked at my matchups at the beginning, I played 3 Salamangreat, 2 Despia, so it's just terrible there. And like I played 2 Rogue matchups where it's not great or I didn't draw it. The only time this card came up was against the Sword Soul match. He specialed Vishuda, I flipped Gozen Match, so we just went next game. Like that's how quick that matchup was because of Gozen Match. These were in here for the Sword Soul I expected. I expected a lot of Sword Soul, I expected a lot of Sky Striker, and I expected a lot of the Punk Therion or Therion Synchro decks or Punk Synchro decks, and this destroys those. I didn't play against many of those, so Gozen Match was sort of just a brick game 1. But I don't know if I'd take these out because for the reason I put them in, I think these cards are phenomenal. And this was the only Floodgate I chose to play in my main deck. I have 1 more Floodgate in my side deck. But yeah, contrary to the guy who did really well in Fort Worth, who was playing 15 or 18 Floodgates, I forget the number, he was maining Summon Limit and Mistakes. I only chose to play 3 Floodgates, and they weren't even that great. So I'm definitely glad with the way I decided to play the list without the Floodgates. Because obviously it worked really well, getting second, but Gozen Match I would consider keeping in because it doesn't hurt you at all like a card like Skill Drain does, but it is still very, very powerful for the right matchups. So that is it for the main deck. Going on into the extra deck. All right, so first we have the 3 Rexstrom, and this card is so good. Like, going into the event, I knew, resolving Frenzy, summoning Rexstrom was going to be game sometimes, and because Rexstrom is that broken, but gosh, he is, this card is insane. He is so broken. I just uploaded a tier list video where I was talking about Rexstrom just destroying half the format, but like it's tough in some matchups, which is true. But man, he really showed up at the regional. Like he just dominated, and yeah, definitely maxing Rexstrom. The third one actually never came up. I could have played 2 and it wouldn't have made a difference, but you kind of want 3 just in case it does. 3 Kentragina, this card is obviously insane because it means you get a giant beat stick that can float and Rexstrom. Like she just makes another copy, and she also lowers your life points, which is probably the most important thing about her now that I'm thinking about it, is the fact that she actually lowers your life points, which is huge because you need to get low for Rexstrom to be super good. So she generates an extra body essentially and lowers your life points more and floats, and she's really good for cleaning up games. But then also 3 Stealth Bergia, and I was on 2 of this most of the time, but I just wanted to up more of it because I'm not playing anything spicy like cherries or super poly, so we have more room. And Stealth Bergia was actually insane. Like this card, we had to ask a head judge beforehand because it's a very ask your head judge ruling because there's like no official ruling, and I've seen a bunch of weird things, but the question was Stealth Bergia versus Masquerade because Masquerade at the surface makes Dinomorphia unplayable. And that's why a lot of people were kind of scared to play this deck, including myself, is Masquerade destroys this deck because of the pay 600 cost. Stealth Bergia says you do not pay life points to activate trap cards or Dinomorphia monster effects. Now there's weird rulings with Chain Energy for other examples where it didn't work, so we had to ask our head judge, but our head judge said that yes, Stealth Bergia will, even under Masquerade, you will not pay life points, which makes sense to me because it's kind of what the card text implies. And this card meant, like, having that meant this card was clutch versus the Despia matchup that was perceived unwinnable. So Stealth Bergia actually got summoned like 4 times, and I actually used its effect to burn my opponent for like, I think it was 2,500 off a Lubellion effect. It didn't win me the game with the burn damage, but it did help me close out the game, and Stealth Bergia was huge. Now, most of the time, you're just sending it off of Frenzy to, you know, Fusion Summon, or you're sending it off for Prosperity, but Stealth Bergia actually performed, it overperformed for what I would say a lot of Dinomorphia players think of Stealth Bergia. And then we have the 1 Logia and the 1 Dolka. So both of these actually came up. I just misplayed against Patty round 5. He was playing on Salamangre. I actually misplayed and made Logia against him when I should have made Dolka to prepare for Ash on a Fusion Trap. It was a misplayed, but technically both of these came up because I should have made this against Patty, which would have won me the game. I won that game anyways, but it would have actually won me the game. And this card, last round of the event, is the only reason I won. So game 2, I got red rebooted, and it essentially went to like a simplified game state where I was able to make this and set Judgment, and he could not break it, and Logia swung for game because it swung twice and he had already used red reboot, so that is, you know, game. I'll talk more about that when I get to the matchups, but yeah, this card came in clutch. It won me a game. Both of these won me a game. I didn't think they would come up all day, but no, they definitely put in work. 1 Tornado Dragon because we are playing anti-spell on the side deck, so something to pop back row. Our deck can't pop back row outside of Brute, so this card actually is huge. It popped a Chuche for me, and that's pretty much all I did. Dark never came up, but I'd still play it, and Access Code, sort of this package. People make Dark against you, so like after that happens, you can like steal their Dark and make Access Code, which is pretty nice. Package didn't come up, but again, also what I mentioned earlier with Mystic Mine, you can like link your monsters into Dark, and then, you know, Solemn Judgment your own summon and get rid of Mystic Mine that way, so. And lastly, Psychic End Punisher. This card has been like super hyped in Dinomorphia for a while now. Like some people are even trying emergency teleport builds just to summon a Ghost Ogre to make this card. This card's like good, but I didn't summon it one time. Like the only way I can make it in my deck is Rexstrom and Ash Blossom. But like, I don't think the deck should revolve around it. It's kind of weird, it's a little gimmicky to just be like going for this guy with emergency teleport when emergency teleport and ogre and this deck are generally terrible. It feels like you're just making your deck worse to make this dude better. If he comes up, cool, he'll win you a game, but he's not going to come up often because Dinomorphia is just going to win on its own. But yeah, I'd still always play this card because this card in this deck is insane because you can just have him gain like 7,500 attack, and that's really good because it'll be 11,000 attack and you just swing for game and he's unaffected. So yeah, Psychic End Punisher good, but I don't think the Ghost Ogre teleport build is the way to go. And also, there is, you know, you can play Miscellaneousaurus with Aolo and do Hauki Fibrax stuff to make him with Kentragina and TG Wonder Magician. I think that version is better than the emergency teleport build, but still maybe not worth playing. Time will tell. I might test it some more. But on to the side deck. So the side deck going into this event, I didn't like it, but it turned out to be just like the perfect side deck. So starting off, we have the Pankratops and the double Alpha. And I sort of, Alpha was a very last minute decision, and I thought it was going to do terrible, but you know, Pankratops, he was good, but you know, forgetting the fact that his Pankratops was put him aside, Alpha overperformed. This card was so clutch, it won me a lot of games going second. Every time I summoned it, it just felt so good. Like, he dominated. Like, I was so surprised throughout the entire event. I was just like, Alpha is overperforming so hard. And I'm super glad I put him in, because it means, you know, like, essentially we have the 3 Pancratop ratio. But yeah, Alpha dominated going second. Super glad I played him. 3 Lava Golem. This card came up for me once against my round 1, and then I actually didn't summon it again. I sided it in a lot. I just either didn't see it, or especially against Despia, I would like Prosperity, see this card, grab it, and like my opponent would go, oh my gosh, he's gonna Lava Golem me. So they'd use their Mirror Jade effect, and then they'd brand it in red, and they'd make it down to 1 monster, so I can't Lava Golem them. And then I would special Alpha, and they have no effects to stop it. And I'd normal summon Theresia. So he like baited so many things from Despia players because they don't want to get Lava Golemed and lose everything, right? So yeah, he was really good, even when he wasn't good. So yeah, Lava Golem was definitely clutch. And then 2 Raigeki and a Dark Hole, because I actually just didn't have a 3rd Raigeki, so yeah, that's tough. But Dark Hole's actually decent in this deck because popping your, like, something like a Diplos can be super good. But yeah, these were for not sort of Despia going second, but everything else going second. Like, you can blow out Sword Soul boards, you can beta negate out of like a Punk Therion deck, or if you have multiple, just destroy them. This card's okay. I sided in versus like a couple times, and it was clutch once or twice, but you know, it could have been better go second cards potentially, but I'm not quite sure. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster and 2 Storm Duster. These didn't come in often, like almost at all. Like, it came in round 1 against Trap Tricks. So like, you could say these cards underperform, but again, it's because I just didn't really play trap decks. Like, I didn't play a trap deck except Trap Tricks. And yeah, that's why these didn't perform. But I wouldn't take them out of the side, because you need these for when you do play against like either a mirror match or Eldritch or some trap deck, right? Like, you don't want to get floodgated out. And then Anti-Spell Fragrance is, of course, insane. You're playing this format. No D-Barrier in the mainer side, which everyone who was asking around was very surprised by that, but like, D-Barrier is harder to capitalize off of in this deck, and it can be really wonky because your stuff activates in main phase, and you might need to activate D-Barrier earlier, like if they Twin Twister you or something, and you shut yourself down. And also, like, I only wanted 3 go first cards in the side deck, essentially, because I'm a go first deck. I don't need that much help going first, especially when it has in-engine Sonic protection. So Anti-Spell was my go first card of choice. It could be D-Barrier, but again, I think Anti-Spell was just better. Alright, so for round 1, I played against Trap Tricks, and, you know, kind of unlucky for him, I'm a Trap Tricks player, or like, I used to play a lot of Trap Tricks. Haven't in a while, but that's because the Brave Engine, and I sort of just knew exactly how the deck works. Like, I just stopped every normal summon, and he couldn't make Sarah. And he went first game 2, after I beat him round 1. And game 2, he makes Sarah Rafflesia set 1, so like an okay opening, not great, not terrible. But then I Lava Golem him, and then Special Pankratops, and then set Heavy Storm Duster. Like, it was the biggest sack ever. Like, I just drew so well. Lava Golem Pankratops is disgusting. So yeah, we packed that one up pretty quick. Round 2, I played against Salamangrate. It was a fun game. I remember the dude was super cool, but it was a pretty quick 2-0. I just had Rexstrom, and he really couldn't play around it. I stopped Mirage Stalio from coming out, and he never went for Lingeribo, so yeah, that one wasn't like, you know, a really tough match, but Salad was everywhere, so it was good on him for having like a good deck choice for sure. Round 3, I played against Virtual World, and this was like the hardest match all day, or maybe not like the hardest, like round 8 and 9 were probably harder, but it was really tough because Virtual World plays around this deck so well. Rexstrom is so mid versus that deck, that like, making Rexstrom wasn't great. And even if Rexstrom was great, they have the Qinglong spell card that can negate Rexstrom easily. They have Chuche to pop him. All their effects are going off. It became such a nightmare. Game 1, he goes first and just puts up, you know, a standard board. And I opened 2 Diplos, 2 Theresia. So you see what I mean when I say having too much monsters is the killer of this deck. I summoned Theresia, he negated it, and I go to game 2. I probably shouldn't even have summoned Theresia, so he didn't know what I was on, but I did. Game 2, I open up Anti-Spell and good cards, and I flip Anti-Spell, and he chains MST, his one of MST I found out later, to stop the Anti-Spell, which is actually funny. And I had Judgment, but I chose not to Judgment, and, you know, we won that game because of Ferret Flames. That was the game where Final Sigma was about to attack for game, and then we just had the Ferret Flames to out it as like our last trap card, and we were able to come back and win. And then game 3, Virtual World did the Virtual World thing, he kind of bricked. Which was tough because I drew Lava Golem and it made the game really awkward, but we were able to pick it up very narrowly. He had Shan Wu actually just face up on the field, which is actually a threat to this deck because you can put things like Stealth Bergia to attack, which can swing for a cheeky game, or you can put things like Rexstrom and Kentragina to defense and they have 0 defense. It's actually so tough. So that card was actually insane. And it almost won him that game, but we did pick up Virtual World. That match is hard, and yeah, you have to play a little differently against that match too. Round 4 was against Fluandereeze, and I drew double Ash game 1 and 2. I lost the die roll, so I really needed those hand traps, so I'm so glad Ash overperformed and Imperm was in the deck, even though I didn't see Imperm. I lost the die roll, Barrier Statue destroys this deck, so double Ash definitely on Robina saved me. Like game 2, like, I didn't even care that he summoned Eglin and used his effect, and, you know, he chain blocked. I wasn't going to Ash the Eglin anyways. I was only Ashing Robina because I only lose to the Barrier Statue. So, like, he sets his thing up, and no statue, I set Double Fusion Trap. And Double Fusion Trap is insane versus that deck because I activate Domain, summon Kentragina, I activate Frenzy, Special A Rexstrom in attack position, so that Rexstrom can't attack into the or can't activate in front of the M-Pen. But then I use the defense Kentragina, banish the Frenzy, and make another Rexstrom in defense. So then I have Kentragina and 2 Rexstrom, and then the Rexstrom in defense like always lowered the attack of the M-Pen, so he couldn't out my face-up attack position Rexstrom. And it like made it very, very weird for him to play. And then we just were sort of able to pick it up on the next turn. So we just like out floodgated his M-Pen with our floodgate. So that was really cool. And then, we had alert to back it up in case Rexstrom got beat over. But yes, that was round 4 against Flanders, and Double Ash just sort of saved us. Round 5, I played against Patty, which you might know from the channel. It was Salamangreat, and again, Ash sort of FTK like game 1. He starts with Signet Mining, pitching a hand trap, so I'm like, oh, his hand is trash. So I just ashed Signet, and he had Signet again the next turn, and I had another Ash. So it was just like Ash FTK. And then game 2, it became Alpha Beatdown. Like he opened average, I opened average, but I was able to special Alpha, swing over his monster, and then set things like Solemn Judgment and Strike and Called by the Grave later on. And big monster plus good traps is hard for Salad to beat sometimes, so Alpha just won me that game. Round 6, I played against Sword Soul. This is the game I lost, and it's because I threw so hard. Oh my goodness, I am a bozo, guys. I am actual garbage. Game 3, the most important game. I'm 5-0, trying to be 6-0 after beating Sword Soul guy. This man has 1 card in hand. I have a Rexstrom that's winning the game. He has a board, but it doesn't matter because Rexstrom negates his entire board. It doesn't do anything. He can't out the Rexstrom, so Rexstrom's going to win me that game. I have a set Solemn Judgment to even back it up. He activates last card in hand. It's the last card in his hand. It's Emergence. He has a face-up Monk and a face-up Baron and like some other stuff that does nothing. And I'm sitting there, wow, he's activating the last card in his hand as Emergence. I have a set Judgment. And in my head, I'm like, well, Emergence is just going to search a Sword Soul card. What's it going to do? And I played Sword Soul, right? Like I top 4'd with Sword Soul. I just forgot the fact that Emergence could add Vishuda there. So I say, yeah, it's good. I don't use my Solemn Judgment on his last card. He adds Vishuda, bounces my Rexstrom, and just wins the game. Oh, it was so frustrating. I was really tilted after that, but luckily we didn't tilt too hard, but I am a bozo. The worst misplay I've ever made in my life, almost. And yeah, that really sucked. But he was a cool guy, and credit to him for finding the way to win. Round 7, I played against Despia. Obviously a super hard matchup, and one I wanted to talk about because aspiring Dinomorphia players probably want to know how to beat Despia. And again, I sort of mentioned it earlier, it's Stealth Bergia against Masquerade is super good. And of course, making sure you have Alert in case they're going to have Super Poly, or having Sonic to negate their blowouts. And I had the right interrupts, I won that die roll, and we were able to play around Masquerade and win. Honestly though, one thing that happened in that match that was super clutch, because we could have lost very easily. I will mention this about that match. I'm at 3,000 life points. He has a Masquerade, a Dramaturge, and a Luber that already declared an attack. He swings with Dramaturge for game, right? And I have Ferret Flames. Normally if I activate Ferret Flames in that situation, he sends everything back but Dramaturge and I die for exact game. But because Masquerade was up, I had to pay 600 life points to activate the Ferret Flames. So I go down to 2,400, and then he is forced to send back both Dramaturge and Masquerade to deck. So instead of losing, because of Masquerade, we were in a phenomenal position to win that game. So that was one of the matches where Ferret Flames was insanely clutch, was that. I almost forgot about it, but yeah, that happened there. Round 8, I played against Baron. Super good player. He's pretty well known down south in a couple of places for sure. He won the Fort Worth Regional where I got top 4. Super cool guy. It went to game 3 and it sort of led up to being like a really weird game where Rexstrom was winning, but he had a way out. He should have made Lingaribo and Lingaribo would have won him the game, but he forgot to make Lingaribo, and it's partially on me for forgetting about Lingaribo. I was so focused. He summoned like a level 3 monster like Foxy. I was so worried about him making Mirage Stalio and leaking that off to bounce Rexstrom as his out that I wasn't even thinking about Lingaribo. So I sort of misplayed by not outing his board earlier before he could make it, but then he extended into another level 3 in which I responded, so he misplayed by not making Lingaribo. And it was a really weird game where we like both misplayed, but luckily I made like one less misplay essentially. So we were able to take that game. Round 9 against Despia. Game 1, he goes first, and I try to play into the board. I set 4 back row. 2 are good, 2 are bad. He Guardian Chimeras for 2. I'm like, okay, if he hits the 2 bad ones, we win. He hit the 2 good ones, so we go straight to game 2. Game 2, I open up a good board. I set 4, but there's no Solemn Judgment, there's no Sonic. I activate Imperm in his branded fusion column. And then he activates Reboot on the chain, and I'm like, oh my god, I just got red rebooted. No, I lose the final round of red reboot. No. But he didn't kill me. So the fact that he wasn't able to kill me through my Dinomorphia monsters that float, he wasn't able to like establish Mirror Jade and enough damage for game. We were actually able to come back because he had to use his monster with a droplet, which cleared his board, and we were able to just make Logia instead of Judgment, and he couldn't break through it, and Logia won, which was clutch. Game 3, he goes opening, and I'm like, that's good, and he pitches Polymerization. So I'm sitting here, okay, he either has too much poly, which turns off Patchwork, or he has a trash hand. So he summons that Aluber, and I slam Imperm on it. And he just sets 1 and passes, and I'm like, wow, that's really good for us. And then I was able to just establish my board, and he couldn't play through it, and we picked up game 3. So Red Reboot had me super scared, but we were able to come back and win that game, and that was super clutch. So yeah, that is going to wrap it up for this deck profile. I don't know how long it took. I'm guessing this profile was super long, 30 plus minutes. But yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy. I wanted to make this one long because I had a lot to explain about a deck like Dinomorphia because it hasn't had much competitive success. I know the same weekend I topped and got 2nd, someone got 6th, I believe, in Columbus, Ohio with Dinomorphia. So I'm super interested to see his build whenever he may upload a deck profile or, you know, however that works. But yeah, Dinomorphia had been doing well, so I wanted to make this, you know, deck profile to really explain my thought with the deck, why I played it the way I did, why I didn't run 18 floodgates, how matchups work, and I hope you guys enjoyed. So if you did, leave a like, subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.